The sound was what woke him from the memory. Not the scream of the wind, not the icy sleet rattling against the glass like thrown pebbles, but the low, guttural whoomp of a fire catching its breath. John Callahan was on his feet before his eyes were fully open, the cold floorboards of the abandoned town hall biting into his bare soles. 10 years had passed, but his body remembered before his mind did. That sound... That was the sound of air being sucked into a void. The sound of a hungry fire. He smelled it next. Not wood smoke. Not paper. But the acidic, poisonous stench of burning plastic and insulation. He ran to the window, wiping the condensation with the heel of his hand. The nightmare he had just been having was now playing out in the real world. 50 yards away, the second floor of Mayor Miller's sprawling Victorian home was an exploding blossom of orange and black. The wind, which had been a threat all day, was now a bellows, force-feeding the flames, tearing shingles from the roof and sending them spinning into the night like burning leaves. He saw movement. The town's volunteer fire truck, Engine 1, was parked uselessly, its lights flashing a pathetic red against the inferno. He saw Chad Miller, the mayor's son, and the town's fire chief, standing frozen by the truck, his helmet in his hands. He was yelling, but the wind stole his words. Then John saw the faces. In the third-floor attic window, 2 small, terrified faces, pale as moons. The grandchildren. And behind them, the panicked silhouette of their grandmother, Mrs. Miller. They were trapped. Chad and his team were unrolling a hose, aiming it at the front door. No, John whispered, his blood turning to ice. He saw it all. A terrible, slow-motion equation. The sealed windows, bowed outward. The angry yellow-black smoke puffing from the eaves. The front door. They're painting the target. He breathed, horror-struck. The house was inhaling. It was suffocating. The moment they opened that front door, the house would take one massive, explosive breath. A backdraft. The same, exact scenario. The same trap. Not again. John Callahan roared, the words torn from his throat by a grief so old it was part of his bones. Not again. He didn't remember grabbing his boots. He didn't remember the splinters as he burst through the warped door of the old town hall. He was just moving, a 62-year-old ghost, running into the one thing he had spent a decade running away from. 3 weeks earlier, John Callahan had been invisible, and that was exactly how he liked it. He had arrived in Northwood, a tiny, self-satisfied town, tucked into the unforgiving mountains of New England, with 2 suitcases, the last of his pension, and a silence so profound it was almost a physical presence. He bought the old caretaker's cottage on the edge of the town green, a tiny, forgotten building. His nearest neighbor was the town hall. The old town hall, a 3-story wooden derelict, condemned and slated for demolition. It stood between him and the rest of the town, a perfect, rotting shield. John was 62, but he looked older. He was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, but he stooped, as if carrying a physical weight. His gray hair was thin, his face a roadmap of lines. His eyes the color of a winter sky, flat, gray, and empty. The locals, in the rare moments they saw him, dismissed him, a failed something or other from the city. Come to the mountains to drink himself into the grave. They weren't entirely wrong. John was a failure. Or, at least, he was responsible for one. He was Captain John Callahan, formerly of the New York City Fire Department. 10 years ago, in a warehouse fire in the Bronx, he had made a call. He had read the building wrong. He had sent his team, his men, 6 of them, into a trap. The backdraft had been instantaneous. An investigation had, technically, cleared him. Unforeseeable structural factors. But the whispers had not. The what-ifs. The he-should-have-knowns. He had retired a week later, trading his helmet for the crushing weight of survivor's guilt. He hadn't come to Northwood to live. He had come to disappear. His invisibility was working perfectly, until the day he ran out of coffee. He walked to the Northwood General Store, a place that smelled of sawdust, old cheddar, and local gossip. He kept his head down, grabbed his coffee, and was heading for the register when he heard the voice. "And I tell ya," the voice brayed, full of unearned confidence. "If I hadn't vented that chimney flue exactly when I did, the whole place would have gone up." John looked over. It was Chad Miller, the mayor's son, 35, handsome in a bland, self-satisfied way, and wearing the pristine turnout coat of the town's volunteer fire chief like it was a costume. He was holding court, telling a story about a minor chimney fire at the diner. "It's all about knowing the fire," Chad continued, puffing out his chest. "Reading the smoke. You hesitate, you lose. I saw the way the smoke was pulling, and I knew. Gotta give it air. Hit it hard." John stopped. He couldn't help it. The memory of 6 funerals flashed in his mind. He spoke before he could stop himself. His voice was rough from disuse. "You're lucky." The store went silent. Chad turned, a look of annoyance on his face. "Excuse me." "You're lucky," John repeated, louder this time, looking right at him. "You vented the base of a chimney fire. You're lucky you didn't create a chimney cannon. You're lucky you didn't pull the fire down into the walls and burn the whole building down from the inside out." Chad's face went from smug to a dangerous blotchy red. "And who the hell are you?" "Doesn't matter who I am," John said, placing his coffee on the counter. "What you did wasn't firefighting. It was a guess, a stupid one. You don't give air to a chimney fire. You suffocate it from the top and the bottom. You just got lucky." He paid for his coffee and walked out, leaving a stunned silence and a deeply, profoundly humiliated fire chief behind him. He had, in that one moment, become visible. And he had made an enemy. He learned how much of an enemy 2 days later, at the annual town meeting. The meeting was a folksy, tedious affair, run by Mayor Miller, a man of 60, with a politician's smile and a bully's eyes. John had only attended because it was required for a property line variance on his cottage. At the end of the meeting, the mayor beamed. "And now, for my favorite part of the night. The annual Northwood honor draw." A titter of cruel, anticipatory laughter went through the room. John didn't understand. "As you know," Miller said, walking to a large wooden lottery drum, "we believe in community. We believe that every citizen should have the honor of contributing. We draw one name, and that lucky citizen is given the honor of spearheading our yearly community project." John watched as Miller made a show of spinning the drum. He saw Chad, in the front row, smirk at his father. "And this year's honoree, the lucky citizen who will be leading the charge." Miller reached in, fumbled for a pre-selected slip of paper, and pulled it out. He read it, his face a mask of false surprise. "Well, how about that? Our newest citizen, Mr. John Callahan." Polite, cold applause. John felt his stomach drop. "And what is this year's project, you ask?" Miller continued, his smile stretching. "We in the town leadership have decided it's high time we did something about the old town hall." The room erupted in laughter. John went cold. The old town hall was a collapsed 3-story wreck. "Mr. Callahan," the mayor said, his eyes glittering with malice, "your honor is to restore the old town hall to its former glory. Make it safe and usable. And we need it done. Let's see." He looked at a calendar. "We need it done before the big nor'easter hits. Looks like you've got 3 days. Congratulations, Mr. Callahan. We're all counting on you." The room was filled with snickers. It was a joke. A cruel, public hazing. They had given him an impossible, dangerous, and expensive task, just to watch him fail. John looked at Chad, who was openly laughing. He looked at the mayor. He saw the faces of the town, all turned on him, waiting for the failure to crack. John Callahan, who had been publicly shamed by experts in New York, was not going to give these amateurs the satisfaction. He stood up. "When do I get the keys?" he asked, his voice flat. The laughter died. Mayor Miller, surprised, just pointed to the hook by the door. They're right there. John took the ancient iron key and walked out of the meeting. For the next 3 days, he worked. He didn't work to succeed. He worked because it was a penance. He was a failure. They had given him a failure's task. It was fitting. He worked with a methodical, grim determination. The townspeople drove by, slowing down to point and laugh. "How's the palace coming, Callahan?" they'd yell. He ignored them. He braced the main staircase. He cleared the debris from the main hall. He was a firefighter. He wasn't restoring. He was assessing. He was reading the building, learning its bones, its weaknesses, its traps. On the second day, in the old clerk's office, he found a dusty, cobweb-covered piece of equipment, a simple, closed-circuit security camera, aimed out the front window. It pointed, by sheer coincidence, directly at the mayor's house across the green. It was an old system, but the wiring looked intact. Out of a strange, professional curiosity, he found the breaker, flipped it. A small green light on the ancient VCR blinked to life. He found a blank tape and, for reasons he couldn't explain, pushed record. Then he went back to work, hauling rotten timbers, the town's laughter echoing in his ears. On the third night, the storm hit, 12 hours early. It came with the force of a train, a shrieking wall of ice and wind. John was in the main hall of the old building, dozing in a chair, when the whoop of the fire had woken him, and now he was running. He hit the fire scene like a different man. The stooped, haunted ghost was gone. Captain Callahan was in command. "Chad," he roared. The mayor's son, who was fumbling with a frozen hydrant cap, looked up, his face white with terror. "Get your men away from that door. Now," John yelled, his voice the fire-ground voice that had commanded hundreds of men. "Who the hell are you?" Chad started. John grabbed him by the turnout coat, shoving him back. "That house is about to flash. You open that door, you're all dead. You understand me? Dead." The raw, absolute certainty in John's voice cut through Chad's panic. What do we do?" Chad stammered. "My family," Mayor Miller shrieked, running from his back door in a bathrobe. "My wife, the kids, they're in the attic." "The roof," John said, his mind a cold, fast-moving computer. He was back in the Bronx 10 years ago, but this time he knew the answer. It needs ventilation. Vertical ventilation. It's the only way to release the pressure. He looked at Chad's volunteers. They were teenagers and old men. They weren't climbers. "Give me an axe." "And a ladder," John commanded. "You're crazy. The roof is—" "Give me the axe." John slung the heavy ladder against the side of the house, away from the main fire, and began to climb. The wind tore at him. The ice-slicked rungs burned his hands. He reached the roof, chopped a foothold, and began to move, a single, dark figure against a wall of flame. He knew he had seconds. He could feel the house groaning beneath him. He found the spot, directly above the attic window. "Cover the window," he yelled down to Chad. He raised the axe. 1. He brought it down. 2. 3. He was not chopping wood. He was opening a valve. He made the cut, a perfect 4x4 square, and as he hooked the piece and pulled it free, the fire screamed. A column of black, superheated smoke and fire shot 50 feet into the air, a violent, vertical explosion. The pressure was released. Down below, every window on the second floor blew outward in a shower of glass. "Now," John yelled. "The side door, go, go, go!" As Chad's team rushed the side, John scrambled down the roof to the attic window. He shattered the glass with his elbow. "Give me your hands." He pulled Mrs. Miller out first, a terrified, sobbing woman. "Go. Don't look down." Then the children. A boy. Then a girl. He handed them, one by one, to the firemen on the ladder below. He was the last one out. As his feet hit the ground, the entire third floor flashed over. The room he had just been in becoming a solid, churning mass of white-hot fire. He had won. He had beaten the backdraft. He had, this time, gotten everyone out. He turned and saw the entire town, wrapped in blankets, standing in the sleet, staring at him. He saw the mayor, his face slack with shock. He saw Chad, leaning against the truck, vomiting. John Callahan just stood there, the axe in his hand, the smoke and sleet covering him. And for the first time in 10 years, he didn't feel like a failure. He just felt empty. The sun rose the next morning on a changed town. The storm was gone. The Miller house was a smoking, frozen skeleton. And John Callahan was a hero. The townspeople, who had mocked him, now approached him with a new, fearful reverence. They brought him coffee. They brought him muffins. They called him Captain. Mayor Miller, wrapped in a Red Cross blanket, approached him. "Mr. Callahan, John, I don't know what to say. My family. Are they okay?" John asked, his voice rough. Yes. You saved them." The mayor's eyes were filled with a confusing mix of gratitude and something else. A politician's calculation. But it was Chad who was the problem. He sat apart, his reputation as the town's hero shattered. He wouldn't look at John. He just stared at the ashes, his face a mask of simmering, humiliated rage. Later that day, Chad approached his father. "It's convenient, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice low. "What are you talking about, son? The man's a hero." "Is he?" Chad said. "He's a fire expert, right? He's living right next door. He's angry about the joke. And then, poof, a fire starts. Just in time for him to save the day? To make me look like a fool? How do we know he didn't start it?" The seed, planted by a son's wounded ego, found fertile ground in a father's political mind. Mayor Miller looked at John, who was now being interviewed by the local paper. Miller was no longer the town's leader. He was the man who had been saved. His power was diminished, and John's was rising. That afternoon, Mayor Miller held an impromptu press conference on the town green. "I want to, again, publicly thank Mr. John Callahan for his heroic actions," the mayor began, his voice smooth and practiced. "However, the nature of this fire, its convenient timing, has raised some serious questions. Given Mr. Callahan's specialized knowledge of fire behavior and his known displeasure with the town council." The crowd went silent. John, who had been walking back to his cottage, stopped dead. "I have formally requested that the state fire marshal's office," Miller continued, "conduct a full investigation into the origin of this fire, including the possibility of arson." He didn't say John's name. He didn't have to. In the space of 3 hours, John Callahan went from hero to suspect. The whispers started again. The doors closed. The muffins stopped coming. He was, once again, the man who brought death. The man with fire on his hands. The fire marshal, a no-nonsense woman named Diaz, arrived the next day. She was not a local. She was an expert. She walked the scene, her eyes missing nothing. She interviewed Miller. She interviewed Chad. Then she interviewed John. "You were FDNY," she stated, not asked. "Captain. Retired. I recognized the signs, yes. You took command from the local chief." He was frozen. They were about to open the front door. He was going to get his whole team killed. Diaz nodded, writing in her notebook. "And you? You're living in the old town hall? The one they dared you to fix?" "I'm living in the cottage behind it," John said, his voice hard. "And yes." She looked at him, her gaze professional, unreadable. "You know what this looks like, Captain," John said, the old, familiar weight settling back on his shoulders. "It looks like I'm a suspect." 2 days later, Marshal Diaz found it. "It's arson," she told the mayor and the sheriff. John, standing a few feet away, a pariah. The tree falling. That was a coincidence. The fire started in the garage. Found accelerant traces. Gasoline. The mayor looked at John, his face a mask of cold fury. "Arrest him." "We don't have definitive proof," the sheriff began. "He's a fire expert." He was angry. He said it. Miller yelled. "I didn't set anything," John said, his voice dead. But he knew it was hopeless. The narrative was set. "Where were you?" Diaz asked, "between 10 and midnight, before the fire was called in." "I was in the town hall," John said. "Sleeping. Anyone see you?" "No. I was alone." "I want him arrested," Miller demanded. "On what grounds?" Marshal Diaz snapped, shutting the mayor down. "On the grounds that you feel like it? That's not how this works." "I'm not done." She turned and walked away, leaving John to the hostile stares of the town. He was alone. Again. He was the Bronx. All over again. He walked back to the old town hall. He was done. He was packing his 2 suitcases. He was going to disappear, again. He grabbed his bag, and then he saw it. The little green light, still on. He had pushed record. His heart hammered against his ribs. He fumbled with the machine. He rewound the tape back to the hours before the storm. He hit play. The image was grainy, black and white, and angled at the mayor's house. He watched. He saw the wind pick up. He saw the sleet begin. And then, at 10:32 p.m., he saw a figure. A person in a dark rain slicker, carrying a red gas can. The figure hurried from the back of the Miller house. The figure disappeared inside for 2 minutes, then ran back out, empty-handed, and slipped back into the main house. John's blood ran cold. It wasn't him. He squinted at the screen, trying to make out the face. The figure was clumsy, amateurish. And as the figure ran back, the hood of the slicker fell down for just 1 second. It wasn't the mayor. It was Chad. John stared at the screen, the entire, pathetic, tragic story laying itself bare. Chad, humiliated in the store, humiliated again at the fire scene. He hadn't meant to burn the house down. He had meant to start a small fire. A manageable fire in his own garage, one that he could heroically extinguish to win back his reputation. To show up the old man from the city. But he wasn't an expert. He was a fool. He had miscalculated the accelerant, and the storm had turned his pathetic bid for glory into an inferno that had nearly killed his entire family, and he had let John take the blame. John Callahan, holding the tape in his hand, had a choice. He could destroy it and run. Or he could, for the first time in 10 years, fight back. He picked up the phone. "Marshal Diaz? It's Callahan. I think you need to see something. And bring the mayor." The meeting took place in the main hall of the old town hall. It was John, Marshal Diaz, the sheriff, and Mayor Miller and his son, Chad. "This is a waste of time," Miller blustered. "Just show us what you've found." John said nothing. He pushed the tape into the VCR and hit play. They watched. They saw the grainy figure. They saw the gas can. They saw the hood fall. Mayor Miller made a sound like he'd been punched. He turned, his face ashen, to his son. Chad Miller, whose face had gone a sickly, greenish white, began to tremble. I, he stammered. I just wanted to show him. I just wanted to be the hero. I didn't mean. I thought it would just be a small fire. I could put it out." He broke down. A 5-year-old man, sobbing like a child. Mayor Miller stared, not at his son, but at John. He was staring at a man he had tried to destroy. "My God," the mayor whispered. What have we done?" Marshal Diaz just clicked her pen. "Sheriff," she said, "I believe you have a confession." "Mr. Miller," she said to Chad, "you need to come with us." The next day, in that same hall, the mayor held another meeting. The entire town was there. They had heard the rumors. Mayor Miller, looking 10 years older, his face gray, stood at the podium. "My son, Chad," he said, his voice cracking, "has confessed to starting the fire at my home. His pride, his foolishness, almost cost me my wife and my grandchildren." He turned to John, who was standing in the back, his arms crossed. "And my..." He was crying now, his political mask gone. "John, Captain Callahan. There is no apology deep enough. I am so sorry." He looked at the town. We were cruel. We treated this man, a true hero, as a joke, and he showed us what community, what honor, really means. The hall was silent. John looked at the mayor. He looked at the faces of the town, now turned to him, full of shame and, finally, genuine respect. He thought of the 6 men he had lost. He had carried them for 10 years, a heavy, cold weight. He had failed them. But last night, he hadn't. The knowledge he had gained from that failure, it had saved 3 lives. His trauma had been forged into a tool. He looked at the mayor, and for the first time in his life, John Callahan felt light. He just nodded. Once. A simple, clean gesture of acceptance. The weight was gone. He didn't leave Northwood. The town, in its shared shame, wouldn't let him. They didn't give him the honor of fixing the old town hall. They asked him to. They raised the money. They formed committees. And John, no longer a ghost but a captain, led the project. He didn't just restore it. He brought it back to life. It became the new community center, a place of warmth and safety, and on the day it opened, they unveiled a small bronze plaque. It didn't mention the fire. It didn't mention the mayor. It just said, "The Northwood Community Center. Rebuilt by our neighbor, Captain John Callahan."
If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to support the channel so we can create more videos. Thank you, everyone.